Welcome back to Waters Ironworks. We are doing lesson 2 in the ABANA controlled hand forging series. I'll drop links at the end of the video and down in the chat to the rest of this series so that you guys can take a look at it. This week is all about how to hot punch, how to put a hole in a piece of metal. So there's a couple reasons that you might want to do hot punching instead of drilling. The big one is that you lose very little material when you do hot punching. You will lose just a tiny little slug. If you were drilling through the material, you lose the entire area that's drilled. So hot punching, or a slight variation on it, slit and drifting, will allow you to pass, bar stock that is bigger than the piece that you're passing it through. So, for example, if I had this bar here and I drifted this hole out a little bit bigger, I could pass this straight through here. If I did this with a drill, I'd have to drill a hole that would basically cut this in half. I would lose a ton of strength. But by doing a punch and drift, most of the material is going to be pushed out to the sides. You can see there's a little bit of swelling here. So you have all that material in there. You keep your strength while still establishing the hole for whatever to go through. So let's take a look at what's kind of going on when we do hot punching. So we've got our bar. We're looking at it from the side here. We're going to come in with our hot punch and we're going to shove this material down, and we're going to shove it all the way down like this. And most of this material gets pushed out to the sides. A little bit, a slug will be trapped down here at the bottom. And what we want to do is hammer all the way down, right, if we've got our anvil here, until the hot punch is basically hitting the anvil. When you're doing this, you'll feel like the punch is no longer moving through the metal when you hit it. And it will also sound, I think, more solid, like you're hammering your punch straight into the anvil rather than into the piece of hot metal. So those are the kind of things that you want to listen for. Once you've got it to this stage, what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over. Like this. And then we come in the other direction with our hot punch and push this slug back this way. It's nicer if you do this while the bar is a little bit cooler. What you're looking for here is really kind of a shearing action so that the metal breaks away. If you've got it really hot, it'll stretch more, it'll be a little bit more ragged. So when you're going through the second side, if it's down into a red heat, even a kind of hot black heat, you're going to be okay to knock the slug out. Where this can go wrong, if you do it unintentionally, is really when you wind up with kind of this situation. So we've got our bar, we come in, we push the material down, we flip it over. So we've got this situation, and then we come in with our hot punch and we're off center. And now we drive this down and it pushes this portion of the material down and kind of this slug, and things get ugly in here. It gets kind of messy, and your hole is not very straight. If you're not meaning to do this, it's a mistake. If you are looking at passing a bar through in an angle, right? Like if I want to come through with something this way, this is actually a technique you can use to establish angled holes. But for this, and what ABANA is looking for in lesson 2 here, is just a straight hole through. Once we've got that hole established, we're going to use a drift to drift it out to 3/8 of an inch size. I'll talk to you guys a little bit about drifting when we get to that stage. But this is the basics of it, right? Hammer all the way through to the anvil, flip it over, go through the other way. When this gets back down to here, you will want to put this over the Pritchell hole in your anvil so that you can knock it through. One very important note is make sure that, well, you don't need it for the hot punching. For the drifting, you'll need to make sure that your drift can fit through your pritchel hole. For the hot punching, it should fit through unless you're using something that's really a crazy size, right? Because your punch is not going to go all the way into the pritchel hole. So let's get some metal hot and take a look at how this works. We've got the forge heating up. Before we put this in and start getting it hot, I want to put a punch mark in it. I've got, the book calls for about 24 inches of 3/8 by 1 inch stock. This is more like 12 inches, so I'll need to use a pair of tongs holding it. But I want to take this and I want to put a mark with my center punch where I'm gonna punch this hole. So I'm gonna come in right about there. And I'm looking for a pretty good sized mark here that's gonna be easy to see. I'll give it one more hit. So now that I've got this established, I can put this in, heat it up, and when I come back out, that's going to be where I use my, my punch in order to make that hole. Our stock is good and hot here. I normally do not wear gloves when I'm forging. In this case, I'm going to put one glove on, so I've got a little bit of protection when I'm holding my punch over the hot steel. This is just to keep the ambient heat from the steel from making my hand uncomfortable. So, let me grab my tongs. Set the steel. We can see that punch mark, center punch mark. I'm going to put my hot punch right here. Make sure I'm good. Every 4 or 5 blows, you're going to want to take your punch and cool it off, just to make sure that you're not messing up the temper. Let's give this one more hit. That's looking pretty solid. So let's flip this over now, and you'll see right here, there's a bit of a flat spot. That's where the punch was driving in from the other side. So I know I'm going to want to come back, put my punch right on that flat spot right there. And then hammer back down. That's almost all the way through. So I'm going to put it over this hole. And there we go. As easy as that, we've got our hole here. The next thing we're going to want to do is drift this to 3/8 inch size. So my goal with this practice is that this 3/8 inch round bar can pass right through there. Got a little ways to go, so let's get it hot and we'll drift it out. The steel is hot. We are ready to drift. I'll put a link to a video on how to make a drift if you need that. You'll notice I'm using a swage block this time. Just picked this up, and that's because my drift will fit through this hole. It will not fit through the pritchel hole on my anvil. Anytime you're doing this punching or drifting, you really want to support as much of the metal as possible and really have your hole and whatever you're using as the backing material be just a hair bigger than the drift that you're making. That way you don't get a lot of bowing and flexing in the material. So let's pull it out. This is mild steel, the drift, so I can use a normal hammer for it. I'm going to put that right over the hole, drop that in, and you'll notice how quickly that material starts cooling. I don't want to stress this, so I'm going to knock it out, flatten it a little bit, back into the forge to heat up. And these drifts, I cannot stress this enough, they are hot when they come out of the metal. Always pick them up with a pair of tongs in order to quench them off before you use them again. So I'm going to quench this. I'll be back with you as soon as that's hot. Continue drifting this a little bit bigger here. There we go. And you can see here, because my Pritchell hole, or my hole is a little bit bigger than I needed, I've got a little bit of deformation there. Not a big deal. I'm going to heat this up one more time, drive the drift through it the other direction, just to make sure everything's nice and clean. And then we'll be ready to test to make sure our 3/8 inch stock slides through there. Steel is hot. We're going to drive the drift through one last time here. Everything nice and flat. So while this steel is hot, it's going to be slightly larger, right? It expands when it's hot. This goes through no problem. The real question will be, does it still go through when I've cooled this down and quench it? So I'm going to jump off, quench this real quick. I'll be right back with you. We've quenched this. I've got a bit of 3/8 inch stock here, and the question is, does it fit through? Look at that. Beautiful, fits right through. So we've managed to put a 3/8 inch hole in this stock, and I found the slug that we punched out earlier. Let's see if we can zoom in on that, Gregory. We lost just this little tiny piece of steel here from that giant hole. One of the big advantages of punching and drifting over drilling is we lost this much steel instead of a 3/8 inch hole's worth of material right here. So a lot more structural integrity in the bar. It also gives you a very classic blacksmith look. So anytime you're looking at how metal is joined, if you see this kind of characteristic bulging out at the side of joins, it's a good sign that either punching and drifting or slitting and drifting was used in that process. And I've lost the slug, but that's okay. So that's the goal with lesson 2 in the ABANA controlled hand forging series. Next week we're going to, or the week after maybe, we're going to get into drawing out and making a cone instead of a pyramid. So I'll be back to talk with you guys about that soon. Thanks so much for joining me. Happy forging.